Hello, I'm Deep Dylan, your host, and today we have Artem Semjanow, the founder and CEO of Neatsy.ai. Artem leads a team leveraging advanced smartphone features like 3D scanning abilities to help with orthopedic diagnostics, self-checkup, and personalized therapy solutions. Artem and his team collaborate with Harvard Medical School to streamline telehealth and remote diagnostics for patients and doctors. Let's get started. So, Artem, maybe start by telling me what is it that Neatsy does, and maybe walk us through from a patient's standpoint, what the experience looks like. We'll just take it from there. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to meet everyone. My name is Artem Semjanow. I'm a CEO and co-founder at Neatsy. And essentially, Neatsy is an app that helps people with musculoskeletal pains. What does it mean is that if you have foot pain, knee pain, spine pain, neck pain, the app might help you. So you essentially take the app, make a couple of pictures of your foot or spine. It analyzes the shape of your foot and spine and understand any posture issues that you might have. And the app generates a physical therapy program for you. Or you can even make a custom orthotics. Both of them could help you to alleviate the pain issues. And also the app would tell you that you might see the doctor. You really have to see the doctor if it sees some kind of risks, potential risks.
All right. Yeah. So Artem, tell me, like, I'm envisioning a patient maybe taking an iPhone or a smartphone of some sort and being guided through a process of gathering imagery around, I don't know, a body part or something. I saw this, a bit out on your website. What are some of the challenges you have sort of there, and how do you think about the imagery that you gather, and how do you think about, the consistency of the imagery? Because as you know, and our listeners know, like from a machine learning vantage, you want that consistency. It reduces the amount of training data to really, get somewhere with the analysis. So I'm curious how you think about that problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a lot, actually. Essentially, our goal was to collect a set of pictures that would be meaningful for doctors to assess the condition of each patient. Because there's a very simple test for any computer vision project. Essentially, if you can train a person to recognize something from pictures, there is very high chance you can train a machine learning model to do that. And otherwise, if people cannot recognize some pattern from a set of pictures, it's almost impossible to train AI model. Well, sometimes it happens, but it's like kind of like a rule of thumb, I guess, how to assess the feasibility of machine learning project. So at the beginning, we took a lot of time to talk with real physicians, orthopedic surgeons, podiatrists, physical therapists, how they do visual examination of their patients, what they are looking for when they look at the people's spine or people's foot, and trying to assess if there's any problems with it, and trying to understand the reason of the pain. And when I'm taking what are the things that they're looking for with their own eyes, I'm talking also about what are the kind of angles of photos you should take to make these symptoms or some signs as visible as possible.
Tell me a little bit more about how those conversations with doctors went, because I imagine physicians aren't used to thinking about it from a photography standpoint, right? Because they're usually dealing with the real life 3-dimensional human. And it's also, they can use touch, they can kind of rearrange them. So tell me a little bit how those conversations went, because you have to sort of anchor them in the sort of lexicon of photography, if you will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things of the big surgeons. They get used to seeing the people in the office. They refuse to use telehealth services. They always say, "Hey, I need to see the patient." This is the key phrase that we heard, and that's actually why we started the project. We're hey, what if we can make the tool to see the patient without actually seeing the patient? When we speak about different 3D and how they assess people, essentially, we were asking okay, here's 2 people, here's a couple of people. How would you distinguish, hey, this person have low arch or overpronation, for example, if you talk about foot health issues, or here's a person that doesn't have any problem. And it was a little bit easier, like, to be honest, for me, because I have this kind of health condition. So I have some food problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my personal thing. And that's also one of the reasons why I started that. So I was just going to the doctors, and I know that I have this condition and I know how to treat it, some physical therapy, some orthotics. And I was asking them how they assess, how they think, what angles they need to see to actually like do some visual examination and put a diagnosis visually, and without the X-ray or a CT scan. And by indulging in this process, we understood certain angles that are the best for assessing certain conditions. And we had a really, really long process of how to create an interface that kind of force user to collect the pictures correctly. And at the same time, easy enough for users to actually not to be that annoyed, like when you're doing this, like correct angle. For example,
you're trying to like balance a few different things, right? One thing is the physician for a given body part needs to get an understood camera to body part perspective that's fairly consistent across patients. I think that's one thing you want. The other thing is you have the reality of a patient shooting a photograph, which is different
at their home. Yeah.
They might be in bad lighting. They might be in the dark. They might be just bad photographers. If the lighting's a little bit off, then you have the steadiness of the imagery is more important than when lighting is, more ample. So tell me a little bit about how you experimented in those early days. Like, what was the process for honing in on it? You started off with some chats with some physicians, then you got some ideas, then you maybe picked a body part or something, or did you do all of them at once?
We started with foot health specifically. We wanted like, hey, how we can kind of fix the same issue that I have, like low arch or pronation, about like 15 to 20% of world's population have it. And how we can spot these particular things and do it in a like meaningful from physician standpoint way, and really like use the tactics that the doctors get used to. And well, that was a lot. So we had really, really long way of experiments. We bought several mannequins, like from the one that use in the shop to like display clothes. They were like all over our office. Like different body parts, like different colors of skin, which is also actually very tricky. Like different skin can be like different colors. And sometimes if it's a smaller human or a child, it's also kind of messed up to the computer vision a lot.
That's a good point. So were you focused mostly on adults on the first?
Yeah. So right now,
And walk me through a little bit about the foot. Like what part of the foot do you want to capture? I assume it's the naked foot, maybe above, like from the shin down or something like that?
Yeah. So we did a lot of like tests of different like angles, and we identified that the most important ones are basically three. The one that gives the most information for doctors. The first one is like, you just kind of like, imagine that would be like my foot. Yeah. So you kind of just stand up and you make a photo like of the inner side of the foot. While you're standing on this foot, and you make this photo from the level of the floor. So essentially, you put your phone on the floor, and you look at the like patient's foot from this kind of level, like as low as possible. And patient, which is also important, have to stand with his weight on the foot.
So already there's some assumptions being made. Somebody else is shooting the photo of the patient, because you want full weight on the foot, I assume. But maybe
that's the whole trick. Yeah, somebody else have to shoot the photo, but it's very inconvenient. That's why we built an additional algorithm that recognize if it's the foot in the frame right now or not. So you can place your phone against the wall or like chair or whatever.
And you
can do it alone. Yeah, so you basically just put your foot in the frame, like an outline, like shape to like the foot shape, essentially. And you just trying to match your physical foot with the shape that you see on the screen of the phone. And we use selfie camera, not the main camera for that, because there's a visual feedback. You kind of move in the frame and you see what's happening on the screen of your phone. That's the report. It's actually very interesting. You're asking me these questions. And I'm realizing how much experiments we did and how much things we tried and it didn't work.
The reason I'm asking all this is we did a similar project, with an iPhone camera for a plastic surgery application. I think a lot of more technical people, engineers and data scientists can appreciate this. A lot of times at the beginning of a project, you just immediately imagine all these things and how you're going to spend your time. And it's usually like 4 steps ahead that you envision spending your time. But in reality, you get stuck on something so apparently straightforward that, I didn't really think too deeply about how the complications of capturing a photograph. Like in our case, we were mostly interested in like facial photographs and portraitures of the face. It was a lot of time. Like just getting the camera held right, communicating with the user.
Especially communicating with the user. That's the biggest part.
And then we also needed models after the photo was shot. We needed models to assess whether or not we got the right shot.
So it's not just the main model that can assess what's happening with your foot arch, but it's also like an additional couple of models that is tracking what's happening in the frame every second. Is it the foot or not the foot? In the frame, where exactly it's located, like couple of segmentation models, couple of classifiers running in the background. It's just additional things that have to work to make the interface, user interface, really friendly for users.
So let's kind of scooch along here. So you got that one lateral shot of the inside arch. I assume you wanted the outside, maybe a top down or some other.
Actually, no. The most informative for doctors are like the view of the inner side of your arch. Also, you just put your phone camera on, you put your phone on the ground, selfie camera facing upwards, and you just kind of hover your foot above the phone. So you get the inner sides, because it's very useful for making custom orthotics there. And also, another one is very informative for doctors. You just place your phone against the wall, and you kind of put both of your feet, and you facing from the phone. The phone sees both of your heels. And it's even better if you just walk a little bit. So you just stand like that and then walk from the phone. So it assesses gait and it assesses if your foot tilts towards the center or it tilts outwards.
The physician's looking for some asymmetries, potentially.
Asymmetries, or if it's basically, when the healthy way of walking is you pretty much you just put your foot and that's it. But a lot of people, when they apply weight, their foot just for a split second, some microsecond, they kind of tilt towards the center with every step. And this creates additional stress to the whole musculoskeletal system, especially when you do running, especially when you run 10 miles or something. Imagine how much steps and how much tilts you make like that during this run. And therefore, people have some pain in the foot and knee. Therefore, people buy special stability shoes or don't buy special stability shoes or buy custom orthotics and don't buy that. And this is one of the health issues that we try to track over pronation and supination. Essentially, this is one of the best way to track it.
So I want to go back to the image capture a little bit. Sorry, I get really into the weeds. Now you guys, I assume your team, you went off, you tried some stuff, you got some imagery together. Did you go back and forth with your physicians? You have to get from that to them saying, oh yeah, this imagery is sufficient, it's not. Was this anecdotal? Were you writing it down? Did you build it into a system with an interface for the physicians to tell you what's right or wrong? With the image and with...
I would reply to your question in 2 ways. First way, yes, it was kind of back and forth. It was always kind of a struggle how to make some kind of image collection that is easy enough for user, but at the same time meaningful enough for doctor to spot something from these images. And it was always a tug of war, and it still is. We still have to kind of balance that, how to make it easier to use for users, and the quality of data, the imagery, is good enough for doctors to make decisions. That's the one part. But second part, we accidentally found great product market fit, because at first we were collecting these images and we were wondering hey, what if we can just run some machine learning model inside the phone and people can do pre-screening by themselves. But so we were just we made a data labeling tool for us, essentially. We made a dashboard for doctors that they would see these pictures and say, can they see something from that or not? And if they see some health issues, what are those? And accidentally, we found that it's actually what they need to do the telehealth job, like to take care of their patients online. So this data labeling tool become our product that we are right now piloting in several hospitals that is enabling doctors to see the patient without actually seeing the patient in the office.
Have a ton of data, don't know where to start? Chat with one of our principal data scientists at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com. You'll talk to an expert, not a salesperson. So I want to understand this a little bit. So you've got imagery for a patient. It's coming up. You've got those different perspectives that we talked about. A physician's looking at them through maybe a web interface or something. And now they need to label what they're seeing. And the first question I have is how did you come up with that label set? And to what extent did it include actual medical labels versus maybe photography problems or challenges? Walk me through a little bit on the human data gathering side. To what extent were you optimizing that interaction for machine learning data gathering? And to what extent were you optimizing it for physician-patient assessment and interaction? And is there a difference? And how do you see that?
That's interesting because it all started with just optimizing the data labeling or making machine learning models, nothing else. We were just making a tool. It wasn't existing tools on the market wasn't good enough. We did another iteration. We gathered some data from people who volunteered to participate in this experiment, mostly from different local gyms. So I went to different gyms and asked people, hey, can you basically let me take pictures of you with this
of everybody's feet?
Yeah, exactly. So
I thought you were a little crazy, but
and asked the dudes, hey, can I take a picture of your feet? That's exactly what I did. People were okay, if it's for science, let's do that. And eventually, this scrappy MVP of how to show these pictures to doctors and really do some labeling stuff actually evolved into a tool for doctors with real patients who can understand what they see, put some notes inside, and also, which is also important for doctors, doctors have to use their own EHR system that is they basically make a log of what's happening with each patient, that they have to put some evidence to that. And there's a lot of integration issues, how we can make this process as smooth as possible, just easy to use for doctors. So it wasn't really about how we present the pictures, but when we moved from just data collection tool for machine learning to the actual product for doctors, it was a lot of infrastructure work, how to make it HIPAA compliant, how to make it integrate with existing EHRs and all this kind of stuff.
There's something that you did early on that I advise a lot of startups when we interact with them, but there's something that you did where you said you just went to the gym and started gathering photos. This is something that I've seen really sort of differentiates startups and projects that succeed from those that don't. The ones who just immediately say, I need the data, I'm going to just go get the data. I'm not going to, because then there's another group that wants to sit around and wait for the data to show up from some clinical context, maybe that, something that's just usually a lot harder than maybe being slightly embarrassed and walking into a gym and just grabbing photos. So clearly you did the thing that I think really matters, which is you just said, no, we're going to focus on getting the data. Tell me about how you made that decision. Was there any pushback to say, no, we want it in a clinical context, not in this other, anything like that? Or was it kind of straightforward?
Yeah. Well, you see, it's always when you do collect the data in full clinical context, you get all the consents from patients. It's really processed with doctors, and you gotta go through
the IRB review board.
Yeah, to go to the IRB board. Yeah, you have to go all of that. It's an investment of your time and money. You have to a lot of things happen, and most, of course, and also it's important to mention. Usually, people don't participate in such studies for free. You have to get some kind of like coupon for something like, I don't know, Amazon gift card, whatever, like to each participate. So it's budget really. So in order to actually do that, you have to be confident. I mean, like, well, I mean, okay, of course you can be confident in anything, but you have to be reasonably confident that it's going to work. So that's pretty much what we did. At first we collected some data with this scrappy process of like just asking the dudes in the gym and like really validated that this whole idea works. And then we made an official contract. We did all the IFB. We got the real patients at the hospital, real doctors. Everyone has like written consent to share this data, and made it like all
formalized process.
Yeah, all formalized. Yeah. So it's a step-by-step approach, and essentially you did the one first, you kind of discard the data. Yes, that is not really like just properly collected. You have to discard it afterwards, but you got validation of the whole process that it really works. So you could invest more time and money into that and make it properly.
Let's talk a little bit about the conditions you're actually trying to assess. How did you determine what those conditions were to get them into your labels that you had the physicians labeling? And then how much training data did you actually feel you needed per class or per category? And then maybe walk us a little bit through the modeling stage when you started actually trying to, detect these things. And just one quick thing. Are we only talking about imagery? Or are we also talking about LiDAR imagery or something?
Well, it's a mix. Some of the things we use just the images, just RGB. But for some stuff, we use iPhone selfie camera, which is a structured light camera that emits infrared light. So it's not the LiDAR, like per se exactly. It's more like structured light camera.
But it gets you like a 3D.
But it gets, so it's RGB-D camera. So RGB plus depth. So for some of the conditions, we use the depth data as well. For example, on Android, we don't check all of the things that we could check on iOS. So iOS is kind of like, we check more things on iOS than on Android. Some parts of algorithm use just RGB, some parts use depth data as well. Or depth data enhance the accuracy, for example, here. Responding to a question about how we determine what do we want to track, it's pretty simple process. We just take a look at what conditions are frequent in the population, what could be seen with a visual examination done by physician, essentially. So if we speak about foot problems, it's flat arch, high arch, hallux valgus, bunions, overpronation, supination, other problems. Or this overpronation, supination, also called valgus and varus deformation. And then if you talk about spine, it's different posture issues, kyphosis, lordosis, scoliosis, turtleneck, uneven shoulders, which is also sign of scoliosis. So all the things that could be seen by real doctors when you come to the office and they do examination just with their own eyes. Of course, there are a lot of stuff that could be seen only on CT scan or MRI. And so we cannot really pre-screen for that. We cannot really help for that. But the idea is to make a simple and efficient tool that is just use just your phone. And almost everyone in the world has a smartphone right now in this year. And make it just a simple, scalable tool to pre-screen for very frequent conditions, like frequent like spine problems or foot problems. That as you know, like foot problems, spine problems, they all kind of influence each other. So sometimes you have spine problems because of foot problems. Sometimes it's the other way around. A lot of times people have knee pain or hip pain because of their foot problem or spine problem. So it's kind of, that's why
any problems down there is going to ripple up through the
some people say like, why do you have to assess foot if I have a knee pain? I'm like, guys, it's literally like two sides of one bone. It's like, of course it can influence each other. It's literally one bone, and like your like foot like connection and knee connection, knee joint is like literally just two sides of one piece. So of course it can like influence each other and even more. So that's why this whole like topic is covered by one doctor, orthopedic surgeon.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about is this comes up a lot whenever you have like a specialized human that you need to gather training data from, like in this case, an orthopedic specialist or a physician. That's expensive, obviously. You don't, after you start gathering it, you start seeing patterns and you start realizing oftentimes that you don't need that high of a specialist to assess stuff because you sort of eventually, like, I'm sure you went through this where you've seen enough high arches that you kind of have other visual cues and you can take a lower stack human to assess it. Maybe one without, 4 years of medical school and plus a residency, plus years of practice. How did you think about that problem of the cost effectiveness of data gathering? And then did you do anything about it to go to lower stack humans to increase your data? Or did you always stick with, orthopedic specialists? And maybe if you got those other humans, how did you assess their efficacy relative to your true experts?
Well, that's a good question. I would say that we always stick to orthopedic surgeons in our case. So we didn't stick to any people who don't have a medical degree. Yes, we can speak about an orthopedic surgeon with 30 years of experience who is really do surgery, or about a residence intern that is just graduated from med school. Yeah, maybe different level of experience, of course, but both people have medical degree, and that's what we always wanted to do. All the data that we have labeled are labeled with people with medical degree. That is important. But there are ways to cut costs here, of course. First logical step, because since I'm Polish citizen, and we gathered a lot of data labeling in Poland because the hourly rate of doctors are lower in Poland than in the United States. It's the first obvious way how you can cut it out. And the second, which is much more important and actually creates the biggest impact in cost cutting, because it's really very expensive to gather medical data sets, is unsupervised learning. Everybody's talking about that. Everybody's know that you can do a lot with unsupervised, so you can pre-train the models to essentially distinguish the features of people's foot or spine, just using the big set of pictures unlabeled. So you kind of train it the way you would train, face recognition, like triplets or some more sophisticated way. Well, let's pick the most simplest way, triplets, for face recognition, right? Of course, right now it's much more complicated and sophisticated models, but the basic idea, you try to train the algorithm to distinguish the pictures of two different people and to say that it's the same person if it's the pictures from the same person, essentially.
So you distort, you go through maybe a distortion process on the image and try to
well, yes, but the most important thing, you just collect a lot of pictures. It's much easier to collect lots and lots of pictures than actually collect lots of pictures with doctors labeling them. There is a lot of different systems like Aloka, for example, or AWS, where you can just put some small bounty for people doing certain tasks. So you just collect lots and lots of pictures. You train models on them.
The pictures are still of the feet,
essentially, yes, or spine, essentially. But you do it fully automated way, fully anonymized. You don't know about these people. It just thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pictures, and you're just numbers for you. And you don't know anything about them. It's just some random pictures, essentially. And you just know that it's mostly foot or mostly spine with some rare discrepancies. And you train some algorithm to distinguish it. You also set the task to actually a certain person do several pictures in different lighting condition. So you can train the algorithm to recognize the pictures from the same person while recognize that some pictures are not from the same person. So that way you pre-train the model, you make a real big model without overfitting it. Then you can recognize different features. And then you just fine-tune it on the final data set, and you just fine-tune the head of this model essentially on the small data set that is super expensively collected within the proper clinical trial set, essentially.
Did you start that with a bootstrapped model that you were fine-tuning itself? So something on BGG 16 or something big, or
It wasn't like BDG16 in particular. We had like more like lightweight thing, but essentially, yes, it's unsupervised learning. The more data you have, the better. You don't have these like medical labels, and you train the model to essentially understand the pictures.
Yeah, you're teaching the model about feet and how to look at feet. That's basically what
essentially,
and then you're fine-tuning on these specific conditions, but it already knows how to look at feet. You've trained the lower layers of the network.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Shifting gears slightly to the business question, right? So, if we rewind kind of pre and post-COVID, right? So pre-COVID, very little remote physician-patient interaction. Post-COVID,
skyrocketed.
Skyrocketed, right? The template of the problem that you're addressing here is that even that is sort of limited, right? So before, Neatsy comes along and other remote diagnostics capabilities and remote imagery gathering and other data gathering capabilities, you're really left with what a physician can do by looking at a patient looking at a camera.
Yeah.
And the sort of movement that you're sort of leading the way on or a part of is this idea that like we can't only stick patients in front of their laptop. We have to get other data that's more meaningful if we're not going to have them in the office with the physician. That's not to say we don't want them in the office with the physician, but there's a million reasons why.
Maybe you cannot get that often. You want to,
or that particular specialist is, not in the middle of Wyoming.
Not sure where to start with AI? Our team provides personalized insights into how AI can be safely and effectively implemented in your business, identifying both opportunities and potential pitfalls. Take our free risk assessment at xionyx.com. That's XYONIX.com.
Tell me a little bit about, like, one of the things that I find interesting about your approach. So there's a number of companies that are, building like specialized hardware and devices to gather information on behalf of their patient for their, supervising physicians and nursing staff. And it's everything from like stuff monitoring, heartbeats and heart rates to something to like look inside of the ear, nose, and throat, to, like all kinds of different devices. Dermatology stuff. So tell me about, we'll change gears a little bit. I'm going to like ask you to project out 5 or 10 years. What are the challenges in the healthcare system today that make it difficult for a physician to use devices to gather this kind of data that they need? And how did you guys in particular circumvent that or sort of address it? And like, what are some of the challenges that you see in the space in general?
I would say that first and foremost, as everyone knows, like 90% of healthcare money lies in insurance. So it's only 10% is paid out of pocket and 90% is insurance. So insurance companies, it's not like a lot of them. So it's a bunch of them, and they can dictate the rules pretty significantly, like how they reimburse, what are the conditions they reimburse. The United States has like a bunch of health insurance companies, but in Europe, for example, it's even more complicated because it just government pretty much sets the standard of how you get how doctors reimbursed from public fund and how they should work, how they have to treat the patients. And yes, there is like a tectonic shift happening right up to the COVID that was mostly driven by health insurance companies changing the rules. So look now, doctors can be reimbursed by health insurance for telehealth visits. Imagine what was happening like 5 years ago before COVID era. Doctors simply cannot be reimbursed.
That's right.
Telehealth for many conditions and many jobs that they do. So I think this is the major factor actually driving the industry and giving the ability to doctors to use all of these devices. And I think what we can see here is just market shifts and how the insurance recognize that. And I think insurance already started to recognize it's actually cheaper from insurance standpoint to do the telehealth than actually pay for facility fees, because facility fees are sometimes it's not really a doctor's time that costs a lot. It's facility fees that cost a lot. I think insurance companies have to be snappier and faster, because it's actually very good for them if they allow the doctors to be reimbursed for providing telehealth service and use all of these remote patient monitoring tools that you mentioned. Okay, for example, we do remote patient monitoring just with the phone, but we're doing the remote patient monitoring within this niche of orthopedics. There are a lot of other companies doing other niches of healthcare that do remote patient monitoring, both with just phone or with special device that is get delivered to the patient's door. And it's all happening because you can provide better care for patient, and it's cheaper actually to provide this better care. So more people could benefit from this better care.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the better care thing. I don't think we got a chance to address it. So you were describing the models, the conditions that you're trying to, assess via the model. And ultimately, you're sort of building this assistive tool so that the physician kind of knows what the model thinks. Ultimately, for regulatory reasons, of course, the physician has to make the decision. But you can imagine that just like machines have recall error rates, where given a condition is present, they don't see it. You can imagine real human physicians have the same problem of a measured phenomenon. So it's really like this case where the machines are sort of saying, hey, this is what we think. You might be using some explainability techniques over time to say why we think this. The physician looks at it and makes the ultimate call based on what they know, but at least that anything basic or that anything the model's capable of understanding has been considered. Whereas if you have no assistance, I don't know, physicians' memory is going or something. They're humans too. They're busy. Maybe they were in surgery for 14 hours. Like there's all kinds of things that can cause either a misdiagnosis or maybe a failed diagnosis.
I would say that that's exactly what the stuff that you're talking right now about is exactly the reason why people want to go to bigger hospitals, which are like scientific centers. So people want to go to some scientific center because they understand that there are like a bunch of doctors. They could discuss your case like together, and there will be like several opinions, and you might have like better diagnostics, better outcome, better treatment plan because of that, because they are always kind of discussing ideas, discussing all the new stuff what is going on in the industry. And they also discuss some cases of patients, like if this is like some kind of borderline case, they like 2 or 3 doctors can just take a look at your imagery, take a look at your CT scan, and hey, well, maybe it's no need a surgery, or maybe yes, you have to like do the surgery. It will be better outcome.
And physicians have different kind of core expertise, right? Like, not every cardiologist is great at listening in a stethoscope for like some particular rare heartbeat anomaly, but they might be epically great at the actual surgery and intervention, which is probably where they spend most of their time and energy. So, I like this idea of why do we give it to collaborative physicians? And that isn't the model itself just a collaboration across thousands of physicians,
Yeah, exactly. So pretty much, you can like think a bit about that in 2 ways. First way is really like the AI model itself. It's kind of summary of knowledge of many, many, many physicians, like hundreds if possible. So it's never going to be smarter than really smart physician, but it's going to be very good, like even better maybe than average physician. That's
I don't know. A lot of models are outperforming smaller sets of physicians. So I would probably argue that if anything, it's going to be much better, at least for straight pattern diagnosis scenarios.
But I would also add that the benefit of using this second opinion from AI is essentially you can get this level of scrutiny, if you may, like level of detail and a detailed look into your case, not within just big hospital chains, big scientific center, but in every corner of the earth, even in a small practice. So because your doctor would consult with the virtual AI doctor, it just more eyes took a look at you, at your cases, and improve your chances that it's going to be like all right with you.
Yeah, and I imagine you're employing some kind of active learning technique, maybe software, wherever the model output is disagreeing with your humans. If nothing else, you're going to trigger them all to look at it again. So the humans kind of dig in and say, no, absolutely, we were wrong here, or no, we were right here. Either way, that's good for the model moving forward, and frankly, for the humans that might be learning from that.
Yeah, for the patients, essentially. It's better
absolutely
for the patient. Yeah.
This has been a really fantastic conversation and super insightful. I want to end with let's fast forward 5 or 10 years into the future. Describe for me, if everything that you envision happening at your company, at Neatsy happens and gets realized, and if everything happens in the other companies that are maybe specialized in different areas, dermatology, whatever, what does the world look like from a patient standpoint? Is it better? Is it worse? How is it better?
Well, I would say that with the years, the whole problem of doctor scarcity, especially in developed countries, becomes more evident because of the aging population, less doctors in the industry, and doctors have to serve more and more people every year. That's one of the trends. And essentially, I would say that all of these remote patient monitoring tool, that would help to overcome this trend and make the healthcare more available than we have today. So we have better care, just sitting at your home, probably at cheaper price. I hope so. I really hope so for that as well. I believe that it would become just the thing that people don't even realize it's there. It's like convenient air travel like we have right now. And people 50 years ago didn't have that because it was super expensive only for some high class guys. And right now I can buy tickets to the other side of the world and just travel there by airplane. I don't even think that it's kind of something special. It's just the usual thing. And I'm hopeful that 10 years, all of these tools that I'm building and that all other companies are building just gonna become a commodity essentially for patients. It just the stuff it's there and it's helpful, and people don't even think that it's something that they cannot have.
I'll throw my 2 bits on the 10-year out. What my hope is that when you decrease the barrier to getting a professional assessment on a scenario, what you also do is you get people coming in. Think of all the people who don't want to drive an hour to go to the physician, deal with the insurance, all that stuff to get something looked at.
Yep.
What ends up happening is it doesn't get looked at until it becomes more serious.
Yes.
My hope
so you just wait until it becomes more serious. You can catch it before
you can catch things much
serious.
earlier. And so I think the overall kind of care around all of these scenarios is just going to go up. I mean, everything from, smart orthopedic capabilities, smart dermatological capabilities, smart toilets, all of these different tools. Ultimately, if we decrease that friction enough, decrease the cost, decrease the time burden, and then the models get strong enough so that we can get more predictive, so we can get earlier and earlier and further upstream, I think we're just talking about a much healthier population. We'll be able to intervene earlier. I mean, it's really a lot of upside.
Yeah, and I want to make a new video. When we were going to be 80 years old, me and you, we're gonna have to run a marathon, and we will be able to do that.
I don't know. I've got my cousin's a cardiologist. He would beg to differ. My blood patients are all miracle.
Yeah, okay, but our joints and muscles.
Our joints and muscles will work. Our heart, maybe not so much.
I just had the opportunity to reflect how much stuff we did that didn't work, actually. How much trial and error was in the earlier stages of our path with this company. There was so much really of this, hardcore research and development. When you do something, doesn't work, you throw it out. When you do something, doesn't work, you throw it out. But that's kind of the thing when you do science, and when you try something and doesn't work, it's a result. It's a legit result, right?
I know we tend to dismiss the dead ends that we went through.
Yeah, but because when you do business, it's the dead ends are actually not cool. But when you do science, they are cool.
I would argue even in science, it's a huge hole in the literature. Nobody publishes their failed experiments nearly at the level that they do their successful ones. Well, Artem, thanks so much for coming on the show. I think it was really a terrific conversation.
Yeah, well, I know it was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you for really insightful questions.
That was a fun episode. And just keep up the good work. I think this stuff is so important.
That's all for this episode of your AI Injection. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to know more about how AI can help doctors, you can check out more content of ours by Googling Physicians Assistants Xionics. Also, please feel free to tell your friends about us, give us a review, and check out our past episodes at podcast.xionics.com. That's podcast.xyonix.com.